I've been careful not to believe too many beliefs, but I believe that every person has it in them to find some degree of a happy existence in this world. That sense that if I just do this, I'll be okay. And if I just do this, I'll be okay. And if I just do this, I'll be okay. And I think there's something about that pattern that I wanted to point out to people. Research that has looked at sound frequency and shown, just like the meditation research, there's sort of like outcome improvement in different human measures with different frequencies of sound, right?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Game Changer Podcast. My name is Michelle Dutro. I'm your host, and I am thrilled to be joined by Dr. Luftman today. Let me give you a little bit of background. He's not just your everyday average MD. I don't know if there is an everyday average, but let me just tell you, you are in for a very exciting conversation. But here's the background. For more than 25 years, Dr. Luftman served as a board-certified physician in family and sports medicine, academic leadership, and health system innovation. But everything changed when a widowmaker heart attack brought him to the edge, forcing him to confront not only his physical decline, but decades of unspoken stress, codependency, and the hidden cost of caring for others while neglecting himself. That's not just my judgment. This comes from him and his book, just so you know. What followed wasn't just recovery, it was reinvention. In his book, The Widowmaker's Gift, which we are going to dive into, highly recommend everybody go get this. It is absolutely phenomenal. We're going to spend lots of time on it here. What followed wasn't recovery, it was reinvention. In his book, The Widowmaker's Gift, Balancing Science and Well-Being in Healthcare, Dr. Luftman blends Western medicine with mindfulness, sound healing, and nervous system regulation, offering practical, time-efficient tools to help people reclaim calm, clarity, and connection. Whether you're a healthcare professional, an executive, a parent, or someone navigating burnout or reinvention, this conversation is about transforming survival into presence and pressure into purpose. Dr. Luftman, did I leave anything out before we dive in?
No, I appreciate the intro. Thank you. I think it sums it up succinctly.
Okay, perfect. Well, let's dive in. As you probably gathered, widowmaker heart attack means that things went south on a certain day in Dr. Luftman's life. And where I want to start is, which I think is imperative, certainly right now, but any time, and that is when people are living in chronic stress, which is not how we were designed to live, but the world has made it a very stressful environment. The nonstop 24/7 news, nonstop 24/7 social media, and the friends and family that we may or may not even have anymore because we have decided that we don't agree, and so I've unfriended you as my family member. So
Sure.
It has become a challenging time. Where I want to start is what it takes to recognize signs of trouble or that things are really heading south before a major catastrophe happens. And I want to start by reading one sentence from your book that I think is paramount in understanding. This is page 87. How do we know if we are too anxious, if we have no sense of our own inner feelings or perspective on how the state of our nervous system compares to anyone else's? And what is interesting about that, while that's true, I also wonder if we're comparing our nervous system to other people who are also stressed out, burnt out, and living in the same chaotic world we are. So Dr. Luftman, knowing what you know now, and it was a bit too late, going back, giving advice to yourself and others, what do we pay attention to, and when is it becoming time to raise the white flag and say, I got to get help?
Yeah, such a great question. And I think people who, obviously, as you know, I wrote this book for healthcare workers, the target audience, but, I think it relates to a lot of people, and especially people who are high functioning, talented, high achieving. I clearly was in that category, and I was doing well on paper and sort of as others would look from the outside and see it. And I think there's millions like that in our environment as technology has improved, as things have sort of, it looks like, gone up exponentially here in terms of the amount of information we can process and how we're doing that. We've got a lot of people out there who are really talented human beings. And, it I don't want to say it may come at an expense or a cost, but they're often, for a lot of these people, as I've experienced, both in my practice, writing the book, now talking to people, is somewhat of a just uncomfortable trade-off, uncomfortable, coexistence of just never really feeling okay inside. And just the achievement just seems to be going. And again, we can go on and on about this in terms of imposter syndrome, just sitting inside so many people that are, as we've defined them, high achievers. But that sense that if I just do this, I'll be okay. And if I just do this, I'll be okay. And if I just do this, I'll be okay. And I think there's something about that pattern that I wanted to point out to people. I think there's something about seeing that there is a certain amount of this dukkha. I talk about dukkha in the book, this a little bit of suffering from the withdrawal from the experiences that comes in, that at least is, I think, maybe an easier way to see it, because you may just feel tense all the time. You may feel anxiety. You have certain symptomatology, you're right, that seems to be ubiquitous now, no question. But at the same time, there may be an ability to see that I did this, I felt good, and now I kind of had a crash. And it kind of starts looking a little like addiction. And I felt like, I don't have all the answers. I wrote my story based on what I've seen in the world and my own experience. But if I could paint this picture of what it looks like to be an awareness when that hit comes that then you withdraw from, and you get into this place of like, it's not enough. Why am I not feeling good? I just did this, and then kind of forget about it. And then you do another one, and then you hit it again. And I think there's something about that that's different than symptomatology. I think that hopefully that in whatever telling my story is, that the word spreads in a way that gets to people that can understand that is different. That is unique in its form from day-to-day symptoms of stress, anxiety, burnout, and other things. Those things are important. I'm not trivializing them. But what you're asking is what is the recognition? And I think the recognition is the outlier situation, which really does look like addiction, I think, in many different ways, sort of many similarities. And that was the point that I was trying to make. For me, it was codependency. For others, they may be other things that are, affecting them. And there's so many variations here. But I think that was my point, was to try to draw that out, because I'm not sure it's been described as well in the mental health world, in the literature, for people to, it's there, but for people to really sort of grab onto in the larger sense in our communities, this is what it looks like to be achieving and doing well and not still feeling really good about yourself. And therefore, maybe your life's not on the right path. Something like that.
Absolutely. So this shows up, then, you would say, both in the category of the doer, right? I just need one more degree, or I need, once I do this, or now I'm going to take that exercise class, and then I'm going to take the next exercise class and maybe join another gym. So I'm now in 2 gyms, or I have this car, but I need a better car. Whatever it is, this never enough syndrome is trying to fill a void somewhere.
Yes.
That what am I eternally chasing? Because, to your point, I just don't feel good.
Right.
There's not a time that I'm okay.
Yeah.
And you're saying let that be without comparison, because who knows who we're comparing. If you're comparing yourself to 5 other people that are chasing the same nonsense on the same, hamster wheel, that's never going to provide an answer. So the okayness being one, how long would you say you didn't feel okay?
Yeah, I mean, mine went back decades. I think I really, for me, not being in awareness, let's say, really just trying to survive, I think. I didn't know it at the time, but that's what I was doing. Just trying to get through the days, get through school, deal with relationship issues, deal with, whatever financial stuff, like things that were happening. And I think in medicine specifically, it's for almost all of us, it's most of our 20s. And so you're in this realm of just grinding, trying to get through it because you realize it's so long, and I'm not even going to start working until I'm 30, let alone I've got, my friends from school are already out working, for 10 years by the time I get done with my training. And so there's this mindset of just grind, get through it. And I think that was a huge part of living in a place of just trying to get through it. And it was uncomfortable. And I just felt like, well, yeah, everyone's a little bit uncomfortable. It's hard. And yeah, it is hard. But I think that understanding that there is a threshold above which if you may not be not functioning, but you may be adding things in, and people may be doing things that are really taking away from living any kind of life that is building towards something meaningful. And it's easy at 20 because you just have the whole rest of your life to look at, or in your teenage years. And yet, and the brain's not even fully developed yet, right? So there's a lot going on still that's building that tells you, oh, in the future it'll get better. But then the patterns set in, right? 30s, 40s, etc. Now these patterns that were, part of this thing of just moving on really do become symptomatic, and they really set in a powerful way because of the pattern that was established when it wasn't maybe as symptomatic. And so for me, it goes way back. And I think it wasn't really an awareness until I kind of broke down early to mid 30s.
And I think you bring up a very good point that when we are younger, those 20s, even 30s decades is, I'm busting my butt here for the future so that I can, whatever that future thing, well, when I retire, or once the kids are through, into college, or there's always this future thing. And then suddenly turn the page, that thing has happened. Now we're in our 50s, kids are gone, whatever it is. And the next thing is this my life?
Yeah.
Is this all that, where was the miracle fairy dust that was going to come sprinkling over my head? And now I was going to feel good. And now I'm looking back going, I think I threw my life away. Yeah. What happened with the last 20 or 30 years? And here maybe comes depression or a different kind of addiction, or now we start chasing some other kind of craziness. And so I think you and I both are on a mission to stop all of that.
Yeah.
As much as humanly possible, to say, let's ask different questions to maybe come up with a different answer.
I agree with that. And I also feel like the one thing that I've seen, not only is the work you're doing great, and the efforts at trying to bring awareness huge, but what I think you hopefully saw in my book is that, at least for healthcare workers, but I think many others too, the vast majority of people, and I saw this in my practice, right? I would go through dietary recommendations. I would talk about exercise, talk about all kinds of wellness-based things. And I'm telling you, people appreciate it, but very few can do it. And I really had to research why, because people are studying this. I mean, there's literature coming out from, wellness experts across the spectrum ad nauseum. There is so much on exercise and eating right and, reducing stress levels in terms of overall well-being for human beings. It's a no-brainer, but no one's really doing it. Why? And that's where I settled, and hopefully you saw that, on these little micro practices, because I just felt like if I was telling people to do these things that I knew they probably weren't going to do and they weren't going to get engaged in, then I'm kind of spitting in the wind. It's great. It maybe makes me feel good, but the aim is, I think, in my mind now, to reach people where they are. And I think for that, in terms of healthcare workers, I had to build in practices where it was like, no, you can do this for 20 seconds when you're washing your hands. That's all I want you to do. You don't need to go on retreat. You don't need to read a mindfulness book. I don't need you doing homework. And, I saw a lot of workbooks that were great. I did some of them myself because I needed to take the time, but they are extensive. It's a lot of extra work. And in this day and age where the amount of our attention seems to be just, completely taken up by everything we're doing, in technology and the phones and everything else, I just don't see how people can implement these things in our westernized culture in a way that's actually practical. So I threw it all out and I said, I'm going to build it in a way that really is practical. little pieces here and there. When you're listening to the radio in the car on the way home, when you're talking to your kid when they come home for school, just a tiny little bit here and there. And I think added up over time, will build awareness, will build attention, will build concentration practice. All of the pieces of things I've studied on mindfulness and awareness and sitting and yoga and meditation, that there is a way to do it for our current time. And I'm hoping that I can make that practical enough for people that it actually will happen.
Well, I already recommended this book, and that's certainly one of the reasons why, because, knowledge without implementation is pointless. So we have to start somewhere. I want to speak now to this Dr. Luftman giving out this advice. Is this the same Dr. Luftman that I would have been talking to before the heart attack? And what did that change in you?
Yeah, I think it's a different guy, but that's nuanced. It's not black and white. It's not going from A person to B person, right? I mean, I think there's parts of me that are still there, but I think there's an essence of understanding about the nuance of healing that is different. And it goes back to what I just said. I mean, talking to a patient about something that they need, let's say in the office, or even a nurse just giving advice, or even someone at the front desk in our clinics giving, there is a communication piece that I've learned about that there's no question I didn't have before in my life. And I don't know that we get it in terms of medical training very, sort of through the rigorous nature of this. So some mentors will do it, but not all. So it's not ubiquitous throughout medicine. But I think there's an active listening that is critical in our field. And so if you're asking me what's different, I listen differently. And I listen differently in that one of the things that does get portrayed in or at least kind of recommended early in training is, just don't interrupt the patient in the first 30 seconds. Just let him talk. Don't start asking questions. Like, let's let this person have at least 30 seconds to kind of like, what's going on? Where are you? Where's your mindset? Right? Very, very reasonable recommendation. But there's something about connecting with someone by mirroring what's going on, that the empathy shown allows them to connect in a way where those next 3 minutes, you may get into a very different conversation. In other words, they may have headaches and stomach pain and all kinds of things, but by opening up the conversation in the right way, now all of a sudden you're getting to the underlying reason for the symptoms, because there almost always is, in my experience, and with everyone I've trained. So that to me is the different Dr. Luftman, if you're asking. It's that essence of sort of active listening that then mirrors back like, oh, not only am I allowing you time to sort of hear this without just coming in with question after question, but I hear you. And I'm acknowledging that I hear some pain going on. Can we go there? And doing it in a collaborative way. And so, I mean, there's probably many others that are different, but I would say off the top of my head,
how did the heart attack bring that out in you?
Yeah.
How did that elicit this need for presence and listening and time? What happened there?
It happened before I got sick. And that's what and I wrote about this in the book. I think that I found this aspect of Eastern practice before I got sick. And I'm convinced that was a synchronicity or a serendipity, right? That I found that prior to getting sick to help me get through getting sick and the recovery. And that's what changed me. And that was earlier on in my career. I talking to patients, I'm seeing now there's this data coming out of Harvard at the MBSR Institute of, wow, you can sit and meditate and all of a sudden your blood pressure's lower and your scores on your depression, testing is better, and, objective measures of improvement with this type of practice. And I think once I implemented that, and I did mention in the book, it wasn't easy at the beginning. It was hard. I was anxious sitting there watching my thoughts go crazy. Right.
Yep.
But once I got into it and I started really understanding and learning a little bit more, I think that's what pivoted the perspective that you were asking about. And then getting sick just added to it, and it added gratitude and an added perspective on how short life is, and how quickly things can pop up without us, being in awareness, and all of the other pieces. But yeah, I think it started much before that, and I'm very thankful that I was able to get plugged in, and no fault, and no, it was not my doing. It just came to me at the right time, which, I have a lot of gratitude for.
So if you are talking now to, let's say it's a graduating class, they're getting ready to start their medical career,
Yeah.
or it's somebody who is, maybe you're speaking to, senior executives who are they're striving to become a CEO. Whatever that thing is that that this group you're speaking to is getting ready to launch into a whole next level, and the likeliness of what that's going to do to them. If you had a few minutes with these folks to say, look, here's my words of wisdom to just hopefully, keep in your back pocket. And I want you to piggyback that with your, like you said, what can you do for 30, 60, 90 seconds if you were to give these folks a practice, because there's not one person listening right now that will not benefit from what you're about to say. It doesn't,
Yeah.
I don't care if it's a stay-home mom. There's everybody, in my opinion, is working with both too much acute and chronic stress because of the world we just discussed.
Yeah.
So if you're talking to these groups now, saying, I know what you're heading to. I've been there. What are those words of wisdom right now to hopefully thwart, worse things happening than what need to?
Yeah. Part of it is it's a great question, and I believe that there are many answers. I don't think it's a cookbook, so it's hard for me to get up and say one thing and have some words of wisdom that spread. In fact, I think you saw that I put in the intro. I want to call it too many words, because I think there's too many. The TED Talks are great, and the podcast. All of this is good, and it's great information. But I think the one thing that just permeates these threads from the Far East and India and all of these places across cultures, there's many religions too that have a side of them, spirituality, of quiet contemplation, as I call it, of you can learn intellectually as much as you want to, but until you actually practice it a little bit, it's not going to really permeate. In other words, you can and they talk about it, right? You can read all the books on enlightenment, but you're not going to get enlightened reading and reading more and more about the esoteric principles of enlightenment. At some point, you got to be a little bit quiet. And it doesn't have to be, in my opinion, because of the way that I've studied and I've seen the experiences of people who have gone through this. Yes, there are people that sit for 20 years and then they get enlightened, or there are people that, have these incredible experiences of going to India on retreat and, coming back a different person after a 10-day sit. There's no question. But there are also people who walk on a bus and they get into a no self kind of experience and their life changes forever for reasons we don't understand. So I don't think it takes, I'm convinced it doesn't take some type of a cookbook approach. It could be in therapy. It could be on vacation when you're standing on a cliff overlooking the ocean and something hits you about the expanse of the universe. I don't know what it's going to be for each individual person, but I know that there's got to be at least a little bit of time, I think, in doing that. And the example I put in the book, turn off the radio the next time. Just turn off the radio. Think about that song you just heard. Just sit with it for 30 seconds. What did that lyrics mean to you? You were able to do the lyrics off the top of your head. It comes from some pathway in there that just remembers. You heard the song 30 times. But how much have you thought about that stanza, that one line? Why is it meaningful to you? Just sit with it for 30 seconds, right? It doesn't have to be, I believe, so in-depth and so intensive. But even for the highest achieving person, I do believe that there needs to be a little bit of quiet time to be able to hear our own intuition, what's going on more globally, that I think that can inform the, let's say, balance of life. So yes, you can achieve, no problem. I got no problem with that. but keeping it balanced in a way that you don't get into rails or outside rails that are trying to keep you, living a decent life and not suffering.
So walk us through this micro practice of yours that you speak about in the book. So someone's saying, all right, I hear you. I'm going to make sure that I have some amount of time in my day. I hope everybody does this. That is what I call no input. Just no input from anyone or anything
Yeah.
but you.
Yeah.
Is imperative. So now someone's saying, all right, I'm going to do that. And you had referenced before something to do while you're doing the dishes or something to do. Here's just my little, while you're doing this thing anyway, maybe here's a way to incorporate a new little practice while you're doing that thing. What is that?
I sit in the chair right now. I feel my buttocks in the chair. I can close my eyes for 15 seconds and just focus on that. It sounds trivial. I get it. For those of you who are just coming new to this and it sounds trivial, like, what is that going to do for me? It does a lot. It may not do something in that moment, but I think what the science is telling us is that taking our awareness and our concentration and putting it right there, putting it on our breathing, that's taught a lot, as so many have heard. Putting it on, you realize on these phones, your reflection comes up on it. You're looking at the mirror. If the thing's blank, you see yourself for a second. Wow, there I am. It's so, I think, varied what people are going to connect with. I try to just give examples because I think there's so many different ways to come into awareness. It could be body, it could be breath, it could be an external object. And by the way, for people with trauma history, the external objects I think are better. There's so much training on, wow, I am in my head. I've got these just regressive, ridiculous, intrusive thoughts. I know what it's like. I've had it. It's painful. It's ridiculous. And people just want to jump out of their skin. For them, I don't think closing their eyes and having an internal moment may be the best thing. It could be going around the room in the field of vision and just pointing out 5 things. I see the glass, I see the vase, I see the picture. And just, 10 seconds, 15 seconds of just noting that can take them out of the spin. Sometimes, not all the time, but it may work. It may help. And again, some of this takes practice. Got to do it once in a while. Can't just do it once.
Right.
But I think there's something about that the literature, the brain studies, the neuroscientists, the mental health workers, and the spiritual, all of these ancient spiritual practices are telling us, which is that our brains can be trained in a way to change the way they are wired to allow us some peace of mind. I believe it now.
And exactly. And what neuroplasticity has taught us for well more than a decade, that exact thing, that just whatever was doesn't mean it has to be what is. And again, your book is fabulous at highlighting this. Speaking of things that your book highlights and the work that you're currently doing, I don't think we've touched on sound yet. So talk to us about that, why you feel that is important and beneficial.
Yeah. Wow. How much time do we have? Well, let me go back and say one thing. I just published a book last month. The book is sort of step one of a larger scope business that I want to do that will incorporate sound and music. But I'm just still putting that together. It's the same kind of thing. I think what impacts people is going to be highly varied. For me, what I describe in the book was sitting in a sound bath, which is essentially a meditative experience, usually with ambient type music, maybe some chanting, and usually, there's also visual arts going on along the walls. And that was the experience that I had. I always loved music, and that has been impactful. And it's a whole other discussion about music specifically. But I think there's something about now, again, research that has looked at sound frequency and shown, just like the meditation research, there's sort of like outcome improvement in different human measures with different frequencies of sound, right? So it's not we're moving on from the 18th and 19th century of like, a drum circle is great. Different cultures must have used them over time, and they're great, but that's not an American thing. It's not a this thing. It's for their culture. So yeah, maybe, but now, there's science going into it like it has for a lot of the westernized, things we implement. So that's what I leaned into. And I really had a great experience myself. Again, it's why I'm telling my story. I don't know if it's for everybody, but for me, it was a great experience. I've talked to others who have had negative experiences in sound bath type things where they really were triggered, but some of them actually realized that they needed to be triggered, that it was a light switch for them, that they needed to work on some things that they weren't aware of. So it's highly varied, no question. It's still in its infancy. I do talk about, there's a couple really good talks on YouTube you can look up in terms of, frequency killing cancer cells, and, the improvements are, let's say, varied but early in terms of looking at this in a really comprehensive fashion. But boy, we should look at it, right? Because it really is a potential sort of other endeavor that we don't just have to lean into anymore as complementing alternative. It doesn't have data. We're not going to support it because it's starting to build. And so part of what I put in my book too is, I'm not sure how to solve all this. I know, that I'm going to put together what I think is a nice sound experience for people as I start, marching forward. But I hope someone reading this will start having an idea of, or reading my book will have an idea of how to take it in the next direction, how to incorporate it in a setting where people from my kids' generation and the TikTok generation can incorporate it in the way that works for them. That's maybe different from those of us in my generation, right? So I can go on and on about it. I think there's a lot to be said there, but I think there's a lot of potential, and I think that was the story that I wanted to try to relate, is that let's keep looking at it, because there really is some exciting, emerging information and potential here.
So I'm curious, how do your colleagues, let's just take Western medicine in general,
Mm-hmm.
how has this Dr. Luftman been received with, oh my goodness, now he's talking about sound therapy and breath work and coherence and wow, and meditation, and I
Yeah.
think we've lost him. So how has this gone for you, and how is this being received, all the way down to, let's go full circle. Let's take the first 30 seconds that somebody walks in the door, whether they're walking in the door or you're walking in the door. And I think this applies to all of life. I think this is our children. It doesn't matter, right? Our significant other. And listen. Let's not just wait for their mouth to stop moving so we can get our chance to talk, but to sit and be present. And quite frankly, everything I just listed off, all of it, is a bit, I believe, different than what the average person is going to say their experience is
No
with their
question.
typical MD.
No
So how has
question.
this gone for you?
So what I describe in the book is a very delicate, nuanced discussion that I had with myself that I then published about where medicine has been and where I believe it has the chance to go. And I related that to the fact that this to me is a retro thing. I don't think any of this is new. Hopefully you would agree, right? This stuff's been around. In trying to clean up the mess of, let's say, the 18th and 19th centuries, Western medicine made a hard turn into hardcore science and scientific principles. I have no problem with that. I really don't. I understand why it was done. There's a lot of snake oil salesmen and others who were promising things, and it still happens, that they couldn't deliver, right? And that harms people. And I think we have to be careful with really putting things out that are not well established. Having said that, what I talk about is, yes, we can keep our rigorous approach as much as possible to really demonstrating benefit from interventions we're doing so that we're not harming people. And at the same time, I think there's a way, which I'm going to try again to do with whatever talks I give and stories I tell, to incorporate some of these principles into how we are designing the trials, how we are looking at the interventions we want to put in place, such that I'm glad we're, designing new medications that have changed cancer research and immunotherapy for rheumatologic diseases. Amazing, amazing advances. And there is enough, I think, breadth to be able to add in some other principles to that. So when I talk to my colleagues, I'm not telling them we've got to substitute one for the other, which I think has long been some of the controversy. It's sort of the either or. You go an alternative complementary provider and you're going to do all these other things that don't really have much research behind them. Or you come to me as an oncologist and I'm going to do these things that are more and more integrative medicine subspecialties, integrative medicine departments at leading universities that are really thinking about this. It's a culture change. It's going to take time. None of it will come quickly because we got enculturated over many decades now to doing it a certain way, which led to, rapid advances. But I think as information is spreading in a different way now, in my opinion, there will be a shift. And because I'm talking about it, I'm not preaching, I don't want to be anyone's guru. There is none of this that I want for myself. This is really just a discussion to open things up because I saw something and I kind of feel compelled to talk about it based on my own experience. And because I'm coming from a place of vulnerability, I think people can listen. And that's what I've been told. The people that, again, it's only been out a few weeks, but the people who have read it, many of them hardcore academicians, are saying, I can relate because of how you told your story. And because you've lived this, you're coming from a place where many of us just don't have the perspective yet. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but that we just haven't seen it. And so the way you've related your stories makes sense. And it's something I'm going to think more about, as opposed to coming back with, this is BS. We don't do it this way in this country,
Your approach in this book is phenomenal. It's incredibly honest. It is incredibly vulnerable. And I think coming from that place does allow the reader to say, let me give this a listen. Let me consider this because it's anything but preachy. I'll tell you that right now. It's one man's experience and it's a very honest one and it's very well done. So I'm gonna do this again. If you don't see it behind his head, this is a great, doesn't matter who you are. It's a great read and I think that it's problematic whenever we just shut down whatever it is because it looks different. Especially considering it looks different, yet it's been around for 4,000 years, that it's just, like you said, consider some additional things that maybe are out there that could be your golden ticket. Who knows? Maybe it is, maybe it's not, but let's not discount anything at this point, especially if you're feeling, and I hear this, I'm sure as much as you do. Yeah, but I've tried everything and nothing works.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure you've tried everything.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No question. I, from the standpoint of this more esoteric stuff, the other thing that I did, hopefully you saw, is that, at least to people who are high achieving in this country, who believe in the way we've gone about technological process, medical process, in terms of improving well-being for human beings, in many ways we have, not all, but many. That I could speak to them by presenting quantum physics research and showing alignment with spiritual principles. Like, I don't need to sit here and, run off Bible verses or stuff from the Bhagavad Gita a lot of people do that, and that's fine. I had no problem with it. For me to speak to high achievers, I felt like I needed to really kind of bridge the gap. And maybe that's where it fits in for people like you're saying that haven't found the right thing and tried a lot of things. Maybe it's not another intervention. It's a recognition that a lot of these things that we haven't been able to explain and we're sort of blown off as magic and don't really happen and it's voodoo and, I'm not even going to go there, can be just change their own inner dogma, let's say, from years of bias or what they've heard or belief systems that they've created, to just change the belief a little that may open up a door to healing. It doesn't have to be the yoga. It doesn't have to be the sit. it may be just changing the perspective on the belief system. Again, that's not fact, and it's my opinion,
Yep.
but it's something that I've experienced, and now seen, reading about, and hopefully it resonates with at least some people.
Well, I think it will, and I appreciate your time being here. I know you're incredibly busy. As we wrap up here, is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to make sure that the listeners consider, think about, or hear before we say goodbye today?
Just reiterate I'm going to be spreading things on my website. I know it's old school, but it kind of is going to incorporate what I'm doing. The book to me is step one of what I'm trying to put together. I termed it saturationofsound.com. The reason for the saturation of sound, if you go to the website, you'll see it came to me in the middle of a sound bath, but it was so resonant as having incredible double meaning, right? We are the saturation of sound being the proxy for we are saturated now with input. It is overwhelming, I think, for the vast majority of people, whether it's the daily news, the struggles, the worry about our own lives and finances and our health and well-being and our children and, friends. It's incredible what is going on. I think everyone has that well established now. I don't think I need to prove that to anyone. And at the same time, saturating in sound or lack thereof, frequency, silence even, but using sound as a proxy for healing, it's there too. So I loved that, and it resonated with me. So, that's what I'm working behind. And now, the book is step one, and, I'm trying to create a community like you are and you have. And I hope, in spreading the word, I don't have to do it myself, and others can jump in and experience some things, whether they already have or they're sort of going to, and be part of it. So, I think I'll leave it there. Hopefully people can get involved. All of the links for social media and everything are on there, but, that's hopefully the place where it'll get started, and, look forward to having conversations with people.
Perfect. Well, you got ahead of me. That's exactly my next question was going to be, how can people find you? So if you're out and about right now listening or doing the dishes, you don't put the soapy water down. It'll be all on links on show notes, so people will be able to find you and whatever your next endeavor is, which I personally can't wait for as well. So
Thank you.
this is very exciting and so needed in the world, and I do believe in the medical community, but it's needed everywhere. So
Sure.
thank you for that. I end the show with the same question every time, so we're not going to change it up now.
Sure.
Dr. Luftman, what is one thing that you absolutely believe to be true?
Oh boy. Yeah, this is tough, right? Beliefs are, I've been careful not to believe too many beliefs, but I believe that every person has it in them to find some degree of a happy existence in this world. And how that looks in the perspective from where they're coming from, let's say now, or where they've been to where they're going, is going to look very different. It could be 10% happier, like another podcast out there, right? I'm not sure exactly what it looks like, but I believe and I feel strongly that with the people I've worked with over the years and the suffering that I've experienced myself, plus all of the people I've trained and worked with and patients I've seen, there is a real capacity to tap into something that people have, and us, at least from the healthcare perspective, helping them find it, not finding it for them, but emboldening them to find that within themselves, I think is our path. That may seem colloquial and obvious, but I think our job, as I see it, is to really help people find it for themselves. And I think that's that to me is the work that I'm going to try to do. And I really feel like, until proven otherwise, I think everyone has a chance to really feel better in some way, shape, or form.
Well, I hope that is, and that whoever is listening that needed to hear this, what that means is don't give up. Don't give up. There's things out there. If you haven't found it yet, focus on the yet. That
Yes.
there's a high likeliness that that thing is out there, and hopefully this chat has encouraged you to maybe consider or look into some things that you hadn't previously, and that, like I said, might be your golden ticket. So don't give up. With that, I appreciate you and your time today, and I know that my listeners do as well. So thank you for being here.
Thank you,
I
Michelle.
greatly
Appreciate
appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you all for tuning in and taking the time. I know your time is very precious, and you've got a lot of input. So choosing this one means a great deal to me. So thank you all out there for tuning into this episode of the Game Changer Podcast.